He wants to impose what is, in effect, a national sales tax. That will devastate Americans. It will mean higher prices on just about every one of your daily needs.
Now, I know you might be thinking, no way. I could have sworn Trump was against raising taxes. She's 100% right, though. Trump wants to raise tariffs on imported goods 60% or more on China and 10% or more on other foreign countries. Talk to just about any economist and they'll tell you that historically, tariffs like these have only led to higher prices for consumers like me and you. It's not technically a tax, but in practice, it'll be doing the same thing. Just think about how many products we Americans get from China. If it costs 60% or more to import them, our wallets are going to be feeling the pain. There's also all of these other downstream effects of tariffs too, like they can also mean fewer choices, lower quality, and problems with supply chains. Tariffs can also hurt our trade relationships with other countries and reduce competition, which then makes domestic businesses less efficient. Look, I totally get that Trump wants to protect domestic industries, but there are far more balanced ways about addressing it. Harris, for instance, has vowed to provide support for small domestic businesses and more strongly enforce trade agreements. And plus, economists believe she'll be more strategic about where we do impose tariffs, as opposed to just imposing a blanket increase.
If Harris wins the White House in November, she will become a key player in this tax battle next year, as major provisions of, yes, that 2017 tax law are set to expire. And of course, as we've seen, Harris is more progressive on taxes than Biden. As a senator, she introduced a bill to provide low and middle income families with up to $6,000 per year. She also proposed a tax credit for renters who spent 30% of their income on rent and utilities and made less than $100,000. On the campaign trail in 2020, she proposed a financial transaction tax on certain Wall Street trades. And look, while her progressive streak could show up in some of these negotiations, those who have worked with Harris said that she's probably going to adopt Biden's tax stances. That includes things like not raising taxes for those making $400,000 or less and a corporate tax rate of 28%. Of course, it's 21% right now, so they'd raise it, but perhaps not as far as bringing it all the way back to where it was before. Now, Harris has called for a full repeal of the 2017 tax law, but letting it expire completely would lead to higher income and higher taxes for most Americans. Democratic lawmakers are already gearing up for negotiations over what goes and what stays. Members are planning to focus on increasing taxes for corporations and the wealthy and bringing back tax credits for parents, as well as assistance with housing, child care, and paid leave. Now, most of these proposals probably won't be possible if there is a divided government next year. But a few items, like the tax credit for kids, have gotten bipartisan support in the past, and Kelly Democrats will be shaping up to push for those again if they are able to control either the White House or one of the chambers in Congress.
Welcome to Pimpy's Investment Chat, where we keep investment talk simple. And here's your host, Pimpy.
What is going on out there, peeps? Right, it's election season, and I keep hearing all kinds of gibbers and jabbers about Trump's tax cuts. Claims about they only benefited the rich, and that it cost us a ton of money, and that we didn't generate a lot of revenue, and that the tax cuts were bad. Well, recently, within the last couple of months, the Congressional Budget Office has released results of Trump's tax cuts. They're up for renewal next year. So let's go ahead and see if all the blabber about Trump's tax cuts are true. Did Trump's tax cuts only help the rich? Did we benefit from it? If so, how? Let's get into this. Before we get started, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button. If you're not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I certainly do appreciate it. If you're thinking about buying gold and silver, head on over to our friends at Miles Franklin. The link will be down below in the description. When you make your purchase, make sure you use promo code PIMPY, P-I-M-P-Y, and they'll take care of you. If you have any additional questions, you can reach us over here at this phone number or over here at this particular email. For all orders over $10,000, reach out by email and we'll make sure that you get a great deal. So come on over to Miles Franklin and add to your precious metal inventory. All right, so who is a CBO? We hear about them all the time. Every time an administration starts to pass a budget or do some kind of changes to our monetary policy, you'll hear from the Congressional Budget Office. They'll say whether they support it or don't support it, or how much it's going to cost us possibly in the future, whether the people are full of crap. So that's who they are. The Congressional Budget Office is a federal agency within the legislative branch of the United States government that provides budget and economic information to Congress. Alrighty, so here we go. Let's see what the results were. So we can stop listening to the news, listening to Trump, or listening to Kamala. Now we're going to see the truth. Let's see who's full of it and who is not. Despite the CBO's predictions, Trump's tax cuts were a boon for America's economy and working families. Some of you already asked me what the boon was. A thing that is helpful or beneficial, a favor or request. House Budget Committee Chairman Jody Arrington, along with Ways and Means Committee Chairman Jason Smith, issued the following statement after the Congressional Budget Office issued their latest long-term budget outlook under alternative scenarios for the economy and the budget, which includes the CBO's estimation of the budgetary and economic impact, making the 2017 Trump tax cuts permanent. This is their time to decide whether they want to make them permanent or change them. You already got Kamala Harris and the Democrats saying they want to end them, they want to change them, and that it cost America too much money, and that it only benefited the rich people, his Wall Street friends. That's what we're being told. So let's see. While the Congressional Budget Office provides a valuable service to the Congress, its track record in predicting the economic and financial outcome of the 2017 Trump tax cuts is poor, to say the least. What do they mean it's poor? I remember the CBO came out and they were tearing up Trump's tax cuts, saying that it was going to be bad for America and the whole 9 yards. So this is saying that the CBO's opinion on the 2017 Trump's tax cuts is poor, to say the least. Yikes. Or maybe yay. We're going to find out. It's troubling that the CBO issued a report intended to help policymakers make decisions about the future legislative initiative without ever asking the policymakers they are trying to help for input. Without this input, the studies and analysis are less helpful in the decision-making process and give the appearance of policies being cherry-picked for analysis, which it is. I mean, it just depends on which administration is. They're not usually in favor of Republicans and favor Democrats. All right, it says the truth is the Trump tax cuts resulted in economic growth that was a full percentage point above the CBO's forecast, and federal revenues far outpaced the agency's prediction. In fact, under Trump's tax cuts in 2022, tax revenues reached a record high of nearly $5 trillion, and revenues averaged $205 billion above the CBO's prediction for the 4 year following implementation of the law. That's what I'm talking about. So Kamala Harris and the Democrats are just lying to you. They said it cost us money. Do you hear what the CBO is reporting here about Trump's tax cuts? Look, they're no friends of Trump. That's why they ripped up his policy. Said that Trump's tax cuts resulted in economic growth that was a full percentage point above the CBO's forecast. Said federal revenues far outpaced the agency's prediction. In fact, under Trump's tax policies, in 2022, tax revenues reached a record high of nearly $5 trillion. And revenues averaged $205 billion above the CBO's prediction. Again, they told us that it cost us money. But they're saying here in the results that indeed Trump set a record high of money collected. A record high of nearly $5 trillion. And revenues averaged $205 billion. Okay, just so when you hear them in the future going, well, you know, Trump's tax cuts were no good and they hurt us. That's not true. Trump knew this would happen. Okay, he cut taxes for everybody and he knew they would generate more revenue. And sure enough, he was right. But who benefited from it? So let's find out. Beyond what the Trump tax cuts did for the economic growth in federal revenues, it provided major benefits to working families. What? Benefits for working families? That's not what we're hearing from the media and the Democrats. The officially reported poverty level fell to its lowest rate in 50 years. What you're going to notice is this. You see, Trump passes the tax cuts, they usually take effect towards the end of his term. And if he doesn't get a second term, then it partially affects the incoming administration. We're listening to the Democrats take credit for Trump's tax cuts. I heard Kamala Harris say, oh, we cut poverty levels to the lowest level ever. Nope, that's because of Trump's tax cuts. Again, we have the CBO analysis right here. And unemployment rates for minorities and those without a college degree hit all-time lows. Did you see that? All-time. This is a record. The lowest unemployment numbers for minorities and those without a college degree. Real medium household income rose by $5,000. Good Lord. So when they say the real medium household income, what they're talking about is an average household income. If you combine everybody's earnings, it usually goes up somewhere around maybe about $500 or maybe $1,200. That's $1,200 is really good. You celebrate it. You're like, cool. I made, our house collectively, we made an additional $1,200. No. You see right here, real medium household income rose by $5,000 and wages went up by nearly 5%. Americans earning under $100,000 saw an average tax cut of 16%. And while the tax burden on low-income families went down, the top 1% saw their share of federal taxes go up. So they see how they lie, the Democrats? What does this say here? This says the tax cuts benefited the poor people. They paid lower taxes, but the top 1% saw their share of federal taxes go up. So all these lies about Trump's tax cuts benefiting only the rich and the wealthy, his Wall Street friends, is all a lie. The people who benefited were the low-income families. They paid lower taxes, and the top 1% paid higher taxes. On the other hand, President Biden promised for the expiration of the Trump tax cuts means a family of four making $75,000 today will owe Uncle Sam an extra $1,500 in taxes. Of course, it's not Biden saying this anymore. It's Kamala Harris. If they let this tax cut expire, a family making $75,000 will owe an extra $1,500 in taxes. The child tax credit will be slashed in half. Small businesses will see their tax rates top 40%. So if Trump's taxes expire, the benefit that they're getting would be cut in half. So they're going to be paying 150% more than what they're paying if they allow these taxes to expire. Small businesses will see their taxes top 40%. Yeah, small businesses' taxes will go up 40%. And farmers may have to weigh selling the family business to pay a rising death tax. In his budget, President Biden called for the upwards of $7 trillion in new taxes. Kamala Harris is adopting Biden's tax cuts because that's where they got their orders from the elite. Republicans believe working families do not need the IRS taking any more out of their pockets, especially at the time when they are already paying for a nearly 20% increase in prices under Biden inflation. That is why the Ways and Means Republicans established tax teams that are looking to build on the success of Trump's tax cuts to keep taxes low for working families and small businesses and to produce the same sort of dynamic economy that the CBO sadly failed to predict. That's because they're biased. They lean towards the Democrats. So all the nonsense you hear out there about how only the rich benefited from Trump's tax cuts and that it cost Americans more dollars is all a lie. It's a lie. These are the results right here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the key facts. This is what I'm talking about, how it carries over sometimes into other administrations, and then they try to take credit for it. The fiscal year of 2022, that's under Biden's term. That doesn't mean that Biden did this. This is still from Trump's 2017 tax cuts. Let's see. In fiscal year 2022, federal tax revenues reached a record high of $4.9 trillion, $1.6 trillion or 48% higher than when the Trump tax cuts were passed, and $884 billion higher than the CBO's projection for 2022. So what they're saying here is that the CBO had projected Trump's tax cuts to be almost $1 billion cheaper than what it was. Instead, he has set another record, a record high of $4.9 trillion collected. Corporate tax revenues reached a record high of $425 billion, $128 billion or 43% higher than when the Trump tax cuts were passed, and $72 billion higher than the CBO's projection for 2022. Wow, man, these things are not small by any stretch of the imagination. Look what it says here. You have here a record high. Down here you have a record high. So Trump knows what he's doing. He's a businessman. That's why we need to get him back in office. Individual tax revenues reached a record high of $2.6 trillion. Over $1 trillion or 66% higher than when the Trump tax cuts were passed, and $642 billion higher than the CBO's projections. Look at these records. Trump knows what he's doing. People kept saying you want to raise taxes on the wealthy and stuff. He's like, no, you want to cut them. I guarantee will generate more revenue. Was he lying? No. So stop believing that bullshit that's going out in the media and from the Democrats. The Trump tax cuts benefited everybody, especially minorities. Look at this. On average, revenues increased $205 billion per year over CBO's projection. Nice job, Trump. In the first 2 years after the passage of the Trump tax cuts, the GDP growth was a full percentage point higher than the CBO's projection, than the CBO's pre-TCJA forecast. According to the White House officials of management and the budget, every additional 1% of sustainable GDP growth will result in $600 billion in new revenues over 5 years and $2.8 trillion over 10. Wow. So Trump is generating money, not spending it. Following the passage of Trump's tax cuts, real medium household income rose by $5,000, a bigger increase in just 2 years than the prior 8 years combined. That means families' households rose by $5,000. Now, I wonder why everybody felt like their pockets were a little bit fatter. Wages increased 4.9%, the fastest 2-year growth in real averages in 20 years. The poverty rate and unemployment rate reached their lowest levels in 50 years. Are you ready for this? With all-time lows in unemployment amongst African American and Hispanic workers and those without a high school degree. So he set a record for the lowest numbers of unemployment for African Americans, Hispanics, and those without a high school degree. Overall, it was the lowest level in 50 years. The bottom 20% of earners saw their federal tax rate fall to its lowest levels in 40 years. What did they try to say? What was that thing again? Oh yeah, the tax cuts only benefited the rich people. You guys, make sure you share this video. Let people see. Say, hey, look, you want to find out the truth about Trump's tax cuts? This is coming from the CBO. Americans earning under $100,000 received an average tax cut of 16%. The share of taxes paid by the top 1% of households increased, while the tax burden paid by the lower income earners decreased. When you always hear Democrats talk about the top 1% needs to pay more, they did under Trump. And the poorest people paid less. Think about this. Biden and Kamala Harris want to let these tax cuts collapse. They want them to end. Allowing the Trump tax cuts to expire will mean higher taxes on working families and businesses. You see this? Allowing Trump's tax cuts to expire will mean higher taxes for everybody, including a family of 4 earning $75,000 will owe an additional $1,500 in taxes. That's $1,500 I'm sure you can use in your pocket. And a lot of you out there going, that's not no big deal. Yes, it is, considering he's setting records for the amount of money that we're saving and getting back. A family of 5 with 2 earners making around $100,000 will owe an additional nearly $7,500 in taxes. This is what's going to happen if you let the Trump taxes expire. A family of 5 with 2 earners making around $100,000, you're going to have to pay an additional $7,500 in taxes a year. The child tax credit will be slashed in half from $2,000 down to $1,000. The guaranteed deduction that 90% of taxpayers use to simplify their tax filings will be slashed in half. So the tax benefits, the deductions that you got from Trump, 90% of taxpayers that they use to simplify their tax filings, if the taxes expire, then that benefit will be cut in half. The 20% deduction that helps small businesses compete with larger corporations goes away, leaving small businesses facing a 43.4% tax rate. You know, I keep hearing the Democrats talk about how they want to help the middle class family. Trump helped out the middle class family in a big way. The 20% deduction that small businesses were using allows them to compete with these major corporations. If the tax cuts go away, they will be facing a 43.4% tax rate increase. So it says here, there have been no changes to the CBO's methodology to address other miscalculations. For the fiscal year 2023, the CBO under projected the budget deficit by $1 trillion. So that has nothing to do with Trump's tax cuts. This is just for the budget. And they under projected the budget by $1 trillion. That means we were paying $1 trillion more. The green tax provision in the Inflation Reduction Act were originally estimated to cost $400 billion through the year 2031. This has since been revised up to 2/3, about $660 billion through the years 2031 or $790 billion through the years 2033. In other words, they underestimated these expenses that were in the budget from Biden. You guys got to share this. I mean, this is unbelievable. Because right now it's election season and they're out there lying. They're talking about Trump only gave tax cuts that benefited the richest people, which is a lie. Under Trump's tax cuts, are you ready for this? The poverty rate and unemployment rate reached the lowest levels in 50 years. You heard Biden and Kamala trying to take credit for this, talking about, well, under them, the poverty rate is at its lowest levels ever. No, it's because of Trump's tax cuts, you guys. And look at this. The share of the tax burden paid by the top 1% of households increased, while the tax burden paid by the lower income people decreased. Rich people paid more, poor people paid less. This is under Trump's tax cuts. And they're getting ready to expire here shortly. And you can see here that so-called Inflation Reduction Act. Remember how it's supposed to reduce inflation? What actually costs us $400 billion more through the year 2031. And since it's been revised, it's going to cost us $660 billion more through the year 2031 and $790 billion more in the year 2033. We need to get Trump back in office so people get more money in their pockets and stop letting the people out there lie to you, saying that the poor people had to pay the burden and that the rich people benefited from it. It's just a lie. I'll leave this link down in the description so you guys can read it for yourself. So there you have it. Trump's tax cuts set all kinds of records that benefited the lower income people, the minority people. That's what these tax cuts helped. Anyways, that's it for now. I look forward to hearing from you. I'm out.